Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Mooncast. Today I'm going to have Richie on from Goblin King Games, which is great. We're going to be talking about the narrative in Moonstone, or the fluff as a lot of people like to call it. I'm going to let Richie start by giving a background, and then hopefully we'll have a relatively open discussion about the narrative, because I really like the narrative in Moonstone. It's really interesting, it's well written. And the narrative behind the characters is really interesting as well. So, let's get Richie on the phone and see what he has to say.
Okay, I've got Richie on the line. Hello, Richie.
Hello.
Brilliant. Hello, welcome to Mooncast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. Good to have you on for episode 4. Hopefully it won't go on as long as the one I had with Tom. We'll see. It ended up being it was fun, but it was very long. So I got Richie on today to talk about the narrative in Moonstone, the fluff behind it, because Richie's the main writer. There were some other contributors, weren't there, in book 1? But you did the main narrative, didn't you?
That's correct. I believe the terminology used in the credits is background and storytelling lead. I like to use the term world builder myself. It's a little bit of pretentious nonsense.
That is a really nice title. No, I like it. Cool. Well, what I think we'll start off with, for those listeners who haven't got the deluxe full book, by the way, if you haven't, just a simple thing. If you haven't got it, you should buy it because it's amazing. But some people might not got it yet. They will, because it's amazing. But if they haven't got it yet, I think it'd be really good if you gave as brief or as long a synopsis of the main storyline in book 1. That'd be really good.
So we've got an interesting thing with book 1 is that we've got a timeline that covers the events that lead from the almost primal Torba to modern day. Then we've also got a couple a number. I don't actually know how many off the top of my head, but a number of short stories that also give an idea of different characters and how the events go on and how they interact with them amongst each other. So to give a very quick thing to do with the introduction as to the timeline of the world, to explain why the world is the way it is that originally Torba, the planet or the land or whatever it is, as it were, the people there don't know. It was originally quite a tribal place with everyone all over the place living separately, all fighting and arguing, and there were no people really in control. And down from the bottom, at the bottom of the continent, you had a kingdom that was ruled by a king, and he wanted to take over as much land as possible. So he sent out his 3 sons to try and take what he could, and via a combination of backstabbery and making alliances and breaking alliances and just being generally a bit of a dick, he managed to take over a huge amount of Torba. And in doing so formed the Dominion. And what happened then, of course, was as is always the way with a person who acts, you live by being a dick, you die by being a dick. Don't read into that. And he basically ended up being killed by his own son, who goes on to then become the tyrant, as it were, who took the Dominion from being a controlled thing and into a tyranny where nobody liked it, everybody was horrible, and it was just pretty rubbish, except for the special elites, because what they did was they took over from the main capital city that was originally owned by the fairies, and more importantly Queen Diana, which was the city of Moonreach. And now originally Moonreach was a place that was an untapped resource for magic. And so, therefore, the humans of the Dominion who took over this, they started using this to fuel their own lives and to keep themselves alive for a lot longer than they should have been. So generations passed, and all the commoners, as it were, all dying off and going through the usual, the way things are. Whereas these same people are still going. All until one day a bunch of plucky gnomes decide that they've had enough, and they're going to blow up Moonreach by planting some explosives underneath it, and in doing so started the Commonwealth. Things carry on, there's a bit more infighting left, right and centre, and we kind of end up where we are today, where we have the two different groups, the Commonwealth, who was actually, as a result of the massive fracture that happened to the Dominion with the destruction of Moonreach, the two are now actually quite balanced, where the Commonwealth have got all the support of the locals, of the commoners, especially the humans. The Dominion now are a very goblin-focused thing, because the goblins saw this opportunity to go, we've got these people, let's rise up and take control. Because, of course, the Goblin Kings are very strategic and sneaky bastards, basically. And that's where we are today. There is conflict, there is fighting, but it's not your, in the far distant future, there's only war type fighting.
Yeah, definitely. It isn't kind of,
exactly.
It isn't 40k dark.
There's exactly.
It's kind of an uneasy truce, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, it's more like Conservatives versus Labour.
A lot of unnecessary bitching, basically.
Exactly. They don't like each other, and I'm pretty sure many of them would stab each other if they had the opportunity. But
yeah, okay.
But as a general rule, they also do get along where possible.
Yeah, they do. There is a dialogue between them,
exactly,
even if it's slightly heated.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that we tried to bring across in some of our short stories, which is, of course, a perfect segue, that is.
Yes, yeah. Well, there was the story was it the Mortician?
There was that one of them. Yes, there was a story of the Mortician.
Where he goes into the council chamber, doesn't he? And he kind of disrupts stuff. Is that the Mortician?
I don't know. No, that's not the Mortician. That's just one of the wizards who's a goblin.
Oh, that's yeah.
Yes, the Mortician is where you've got the Grand Library, and it's all talking about what is magic.
Yeah.
Okay. But yes, you've got the he's disrupting things, but it's actually a two-part story, as it were, and the whole point of it is to explore how the politics of the world works, because we felt while creating the story that the politics of it had a very important factor. And one of my own personal favourite moments of writing some of these stories was this one in particular, where the entire story is focused around people being unhappy about the current politics and mood, where the Dominion humans are upset that the commoners are infringing on their land. The commoners are saying, well, it's all of our land, why can't we share? The fairies think that they aren't being given the correct respect. The goblins want to just cause mayhem because they're goblins. And the gnomes are saying, well, what about the tea cakes?
Yeah.
And I just love the fact that the story is written so that at the very end, they all agree that nothing has been settled. So they're going to have another meeting in order to arrange when the next meeting is going to be in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
And it's all bureaucracy.
Sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. So they're having meetings to have meetings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my day job is very much in an office place. I'm very familiar with bureaucracy. I mean, it's not just an office place; it's a finance office place. I know how bureaucracy works, and I know how it's from my point of view, enjoyable to parody that. And I thought having this situation where it's similar, where you've got this heatedness, where everyone is so intensely focused on their own thing, but everybody else thinks it's completely pointless.
Yeah. Just
like the tea cakes, the gnomes think it's the most important thing there is. There is nothing more important than their tea cake allowance. But everyone else is like, what the hell are you talking about?
Everyone else is like, but we need to share out the farmland correctly. We need to make sure we've got enough resources. No tea cakes.
Exactly.
So the gnomes are kind of like the monster raving loony party of the situation.
Absolutely.
But a bit less bad. Yeah. So thinking about the two, I know we'll get to the third faction later, but the Dominion and the Commonwealth.
Yes.
One thing that has just popped into my head, but something that I've thought about before. They're not like good and evil necessarily, are they?
No, absolutely
no.
not.
Because when you look at the sort of imagery of them, and you think about humans and gnomes being the Commonwealth,
Yep.
and then goblins and basically not pretty spiteful fairies,
Mhm.
they on the surface, without the narrative behind them, you would think of
Yes.
Commonwealth being good and Dominion being evil.
Absolutely.
But when you explore the narrative a bit further, you realise that's not the case in the slightest, is it?
No. And that was
No.
intentional. That was very much intentional. Everything has to be a shade of grey.
Yeah, which I really like about the narrative in it, because actually, in a lot of gaming stories, there is a quite defined good and evil in it.
Yeah.
And that basically gets quite boring. If you look at, Games Workshop's typical example, you look at something like 40k, you've got, well, actually saying that's probably a really bad example, because the Imperium of Man is not particularly good.
Well, exactly. I mean, if your heroes are space Nazis, then...
yeah, I think maybe Tau. But anyway, we're going again to there again. But okay, well, then if you look at if you look at the old Warhammer Fantasy, then that was, you had the Empire, which was good, and you had like lizard men, which were good, and then definitely had Chaos, which was evil. You had Undead, which was evil. You had Dark Elves, which were evil. You had High Elves, were good.
Mm-hmm.
And each army and faction was very much good or evil. There was very little. There was a little bit in between, but very much it was either good or evil. And what I like about one of the things that I like about the narrative in Moonstone is that that's not the case.
Absolutely.
Is that actually the humans who look like they're supposed to be good are actually quite dickish, and like the fairies who you imagine are supposed to be evil because a lot of them have got traits called spiteful, and and they like to mess each other up with, and then they like to mess with their opponent, but they're actually trying to save things.
Exactly.
I don't reveal anything, but they're actually kind of trying to help.
Exactly, they're like hippies that actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to
Yeah. Which is really interesting, and I mean, it works for me because I love fairies, but and I think they are very popular, so I think people will be quite interested to know that.
Yes, but at the same time, of course, let's not forget that again, even the fairies have a quite a dark side to them as well.
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Diana murders other people to extend their own life. That's fairly evil.
But this is one of the good things I like about the fact that because Tom and I have a brilliant partnership when it comes to design. We've known each other for longer than I care to imagine, and we can bounce ideas off each other. But one of the things is that we both get each other's light and dark side, and so he definitely brings the comedy value. If there's a comic character, virtually always he's created it. If there's whereas I'm very much the other side. I'm the almost skirting horror, and so if there's a character with a bit of a dark side, then chances are that's coming back from my side and in my influence.
Yeah, cool. But that's good though. It's good that there's that. Most games I think are better when you've got some kind of partnership where there's a difference, not to say of opinion, but a difference of idea.
Yes, I mean, I think it
creates better balance. Because if the whole of Moonstone was just comedy, whimsical, and it was all just comedy, then it would appeal to certain audience, but then not to others.
Exactly.
So if you can get a bit of each in, it appeals to a broader.
But I also think as well, I agree entirely with what you're saying, but I also think that, in my opinion, adding a little bit of spice enhances the sugar, if that makes sense. So you put in the darkness, and it actually makes the funnier, and likewise, then it goes backwards. So it's actually the contrast enhances both. And
but what's also nice is you've got the kind of almost like slapstick comedy of the gnomes wanting their tea cakes, and then you've got the slightly warped humor of like Silvertongue, who's just there to screw people over. And like Tito and Fencer, who are basically just like sadistically funny.
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely.
So there's still humour in the fairies. And there's definitely humour in the goblins, even though, you know, Beaky Bobby likes to pour acid on people.
That was one of the first stories I wrote for Moonstone. That was.
Yeah, likes to drink things that are going to kill them, but he likes to. He's also laughing at the same time. But on the flip side of it, there's Agatha trying to buy lots of love potions to get Fritz in love with her. And he actually looks at the wrong woman, and then she's, you know, and there's that almost like Carry On comedy in that bit. And
when our guest writer sent that over to us, we were like, "This is perfect, just exactly like this print. Just print this."
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
Yeah. This is cool. Cool. Well, that was good. That was a nice little synopsis of so far, and that was cool. What was your favourite part of the narrative to write? Any of it? Not necessarily the narrative. What was your favourite part to write, or the bit that you thought, I'm looking forward to doing this bit the most?
The most, I think, this is actually a bit weird, but it wasn't actually writing as such, but it was actually designing the world map.
Okay, that's cool.
I'd never done anything like that before, and I was working quite closely with our artist Shane, and giving like rough ideas and coming up with names and things, and it was really good because I had free reign to just completely create an entire world and say, right, well, what could exist? What do we need? What, you know, so we need, you know, and it was a really enjoyable experience to think about it from terms of not just, you know, what scenes have you perhaps read about in books or you've seen in films you would love to see recreated, but also other factors of what would exist if it was real, but also what sort of terrain do people have on their tables, so therefore they can say, well, wait, you know, I've got a ruined elven temple, so here we go, let's use that as the sunken city of Moonreach, for example. Or I've got a dwarven fortress, well, that can be the giant's citadel in the mountains. You know, all of these different type of things. And it was largely because it was so different. I'd never done anything like it before, and it was really, really enjoyable. And every single time I came up with a new location, images of what it would look like was just flooding through my head, and so I'm writing out these long explanations to our artist. And the funny thing is, of course, you know, I'm going into such detail about the sort of stuff that happened, and in the end, he's doing like, here's a house that represents that town. But it was important. I felt that, you know, it had. Yeah, I felt that it had to explain certain things. I mean, so as we're hoping to explore more, actually, I can mention slightly in book 2, as part of our narrative in book 2, there's certain aspects that are going to be covered in more detail, such as along the east side of the map, there's actually a booze trail.
Oh, very cool.
Where you've got you can't really see it because it's just a map. It's just place names. But the storyline behind them is that you've got one town that basically is a farm town, and they all produce all the hops, and then they ship it off to the nearest thing that's basically distillery. And there's another one that's and then they go over to the port to ship it off to the rest of the world. And it's basically a booze trail. And so it's little tiny things like that was so enjoyable, and in doing so was able to feed through. So then whenever I was and it was a brilliant point of reference, because then whenever I was then writing about places, I can go, well, I've got this point of reference to say. So if I go, well, if I want to have a story set in a certain woodland, well, what have we got available? Let's put it there. Well, in that case, what's nearby? Do we have, pardon me, do we have human settlements? Do we have goblin settlements? And it almost started to allow certain stories to almost write themselves.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you write any story, one of the best places to start is where you're setting it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the characters you've got from the characters. So the characters are already there for you because either you or Tom or whatever, you had the characters there.
Yeah.
With their play styles and things started. So you needed a setting, so you make a setting, and then you can start building stories from there, can't you? So
exactly.
Well, that's interesting. That wasn't what I expected you to say, to be honest. But I don't know what I don't know what I expected you to say, but I didn't think you to say. But that's a really interesting answer, actually. So, and I'll share mine afterwards. But I'm
Okay.
interested to know which and this purely from a narrative point of view, purely from a background fluffy point of view, which is your favourite character?
My favorite character from a narrative fluffy background, it's largely because of what's in my head rather than actually written down, is Friar Flavius.
Yeah, I think I already know why. But go on.
Well, it's a combination. It's a combination of this. One, I love the name.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, the reason for the name is that when we first had the art done, I looked at it and I showed it to my wife, and she saw it, and she was like, "It looks like he's got a massive clock around his neck, like the artist Flavor Flav." And originally he had a different name, and I think he was originally called Friar Gourmand. And so as a result, we changed him to Friar Flavius. And I like that.
It's nicely alliterative as well, so that kind of works.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing I really like from a story point of view is how so little is shown in the book. He is almost a complete mystery, except for the fact that his likes and interests are censored.
Yeah, and also there's like hints for elsewhere, isn't there?
Yes.
Like if you read the Kaufman background,
yes,
it mentions this list of like items that he's bought.
Oh no, that's actually his background. His background is an invoice. It's an invoice from Kaufman's merchants.
And it's a pretty odd selection of things, isn't it? Which hint at a very sleazy is an understatement of what he is probably like.
But it could be for anything. I mean, just because he's ordered, 20 gallons of, lubricating whale oil doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, and like clamps.
Maybe he likes to do repairs. I don't know.
Yeah, he likes to do repairs on machinery, and he needs the lubricant machinery. Exactly. I don't think he does, but he when I read his background, the thing that popped into my head immediately was the character from a Blackadder episode, which, and I can't remember which. It's in the Elizabethan Blackadder II.
Yeah.
And monks of the Black. Monks of the Black Temple or something, or the monks of the Black something or other.
I think I know the ones you mean.
Yeah, the Black Abbey or something. And this guy turns up at Blackadder's door, and he's borrowed some money, and he's like, there is nothing beneath me. No debaucherous act is too little for me to and he's like, and he threatens to shove a hot poker up Blackadder's bum. Yes. and that's what came into my head, because it's just that, again, that kind of supposed to be a holy man, but actually is just pretty horrible.
Exactly. And the one thing I like about it is that it's, this is just one guy, so he is he's a member of the Sons of the Sun. Which itself I think is quite a fun name. And I like the fact that he's just one guy, and one of the things I'm looking forward to exploring in book 2 is what is actually the rest of the religious order like. Because of course, just because one guy may happen to be, I'm not saying he is, but may happen to be a total deviant, doesn't mean the entire order is.
No, interesting.
So I'm really looking forward to exploring it. And the thing is that because of a lot of my writing is actually quite an organic process, I don't know at the moment what the order is like, because I haven't written it. And until I write it, I won't know. And so for me, it's actually, I'm looking forward to exploring it.
Yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. So yeah, I like the Sons of the Sun. That's hilarious. Well, my favourite character, and I mentioned this in my discussion with Tom about fairies, and it's still my favourite, which is Diana. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things with Diana that I love the model, which is that's not the narrative part of it. I think one of the attachments that I'll always have to Diana is that she was the character I voted for in the Kickstarter.
Yes, good man.
when that option, I was so excited when that came up in the Kickstarter that we could vote for the character we wanted to be created. That was a really, really nice touch in the Kickstarter. Which I haven't actually mentioned before. It was a really I've backed a few Kickstarters before, but nothing where you've been able to vote on something that you wanted. And I thought that was a really good idea from you guys. And I voted for her, and she obviously won. And I think that created like an attachment to her because I voted for her.
Yeah. And what do you think when the art then? Because of course we very, very quickly got the art out to show everyone what the result was. What did you think?
Well, it was a 12 change of underwear day. Yeah, no, the artwork was awesome. It was awesome. And actually, after I then kind of met with you guys and talked to, and we had an opportunity at the pub basically to talk about more the games expert, which made me love her even more.
Yeah.
About like, the voodoo background and stuff. I thought it was great. And even though like obviously she's kind of brutal in the sense that she sacrifices her own people to make herself immortal. That kind of doesn't bother me. I don't mind that she does that, because at the same time she's also trying to look after the fairies at the same time, isn't she? She's trying to maintain the fairies as a functioning.
Exactly. I mean, a large. I at the time, I remember. I think this phrase I use an awful lot of is that she is inspired by a combination of Mesoamerican human sacrifice and Haitian voodoo. And so while you do have the Haitian voodoo side of it with the rituals and this, that, and the other, you have the human sacrifice from Mesoamerica. And it's important to remember we're talking about people who a lot of the time would give themselves willingly. And that's the case with the fairies.
That's why I kind of imagine the fairies too, because she's from what I know, her narrative isn't full or anything, but what I imagined about her is that she's absolutely worshipped by her people.
Oh yeah, she is loved by them all.
She's absolutely adored, and I imagine that the fairies. I mean, I imagine they all know about it. It's not hidden.
Oh, absolutely. It's a brand. I mean, that's the thing. When she takes their life force into herself to prolong her own existence, it's a massive ceremony. The entire fairy nation comes out to witness it. The person who actually, the ones who were picked to be able to be the sacrifice are seen themselves as the greatest of people to give this honor.
Which is what kind of imagined. Which I kind of quite like about her.
But again, so you got that mixture of you do have a very dark side to it, but at the same time there is an element of this light going on behind it. This and the fact that this celebration of death is actually a huge party for them. Yeah,
which very much fits in with more of that. Not necessarily Haitian, but I don't know much about Haitian voodoo, but fits in with the Central American, you've got like the Mexican from the dead and things like that.
Exactly.
Fits in with that as well, which is quite interesting.
And it's something quite different as well. I think it's not quite. I think that by itself is not your. We use the tagline a lot on the actual book itself, but it's not your typical fantasy.
No, it's not. Which is well, I mean, the fact that you've got fairies in this kind of incarnation is incredibly original, which is very difficult. It's very difficult to be original. In gaming world of any kind, fantasy or otherwise, because so many ideas have been used before.
Well, exactly.
So it's very difficult to be original. And actually, I think one of the things that, again, kind of on the face of it for Moonstone that makes it stand out is the fairies, actually.
Yes.
I mean, once you then start playing the game, it's the gameplay and it's everything about it. I think, already that I absolutely adore this game. I made that very clear on in various places and things, and I've no shame in that whatsoever. But that's because I've played the game a lot and I know all the characters and I know it really well, and I still think it's the best game I've ever played. But for me as well, when I backed that Kickstarter, I backed it because of the fairies.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Oh, humans look cool, goblins look cool. Oh my god, what are they? My reaction. Those things look amazing. I want those. I want those in my life. I want them now. It was the fairies, and like Jack, who I play most of my games with, he's saying he now wants to buy the fairies as well.
Yeah.
Just because he wants to own the models.
Yeah.
I think that they're a really good selling point for the game.
Absolutely.
just kind of a face. Yeah, and Tom said the fairies are the best sellers.
Yeah.
Which is not surprising because you can go to a lot of different games and buy goblins.
Mm-hmm.
You can work a lot of different games. You can buy humans fighting, but
Yeah.
where do you find fairies that look like this? And actually, I think gnomes as well. I think that gnomes are almost a bit. I think it's a shame that gnomes get almost a bit lost underneath fairies. Because actually, I think the gnomes are really original as well.
I think. Oh, absolutely. I
And
love
again,
the gnomes.
in the incarnation that the gnomes are in as well. They're not garden gnomes, just like the fairies are not Tinkerbell.
Yes.
They're, and I like that about both of those factions as well. I think the gnomes are probably my second favourite actually after fairies.
I do like the gnomes. I didn't originally. When I first got involved, I originally did not like the gnomes. But then, as we started again exploring the storyline, the characters, I developed a real warmth for them. And I think they are so homely.
Yeah, they're nice. They're probably like the only, I think, nice.
Yes.
If you had to label a group as good, it would be the gnomes.
Absolutely. I want to go to Mama Gimble's house and have a stew.
Yeah.
Because she would do good stew.
Yeah, and then I want to go and have a beer with Morris and Jack. I want to go and sit by a fire and listen to Braddock talk about his stories.
Exactly, at his watch.
It'll just make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Exactly.
And then, if I'm being a little bit risky, I might go and visit the fairies and get killed. But, or the goblins.
Yes. But the funny thing is, actually, I think part of the thing I say about the gnomes, I have to get this out. There's one thing I think that a lot of people probably... Some people will pick this up. Other people probably won't because of culture. And a lot of the gnomes, actually, I believe, in my involvement anyway, and I believe Tom would probably agree with this because, of course, we do share a similar culture, is that we tapped into something that, in my opinion, is almost quintessentially Welsh. Because that level of community that you see present in the gnome culture is actually something that is actually very present in the Welsh community.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because you guys grew up in Monmouth or near Monmouth.
That's correct.
Well, because interestingly, I grew up not far from there either.
Oh, really?
I grew up in Herefordshire.
Ah.
So just a bit further north.
That's just down the road, yes.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with British geography, Monmouth is in sort of South Wales, but on the English border as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not, and then
there's like a river next to it, and on the other side of the river is England.
Yeah, so right, it's right on the Welsh border.
Yeah.
And then I grew up about 50 miles north of there, similar kind of thing. I was 10 miles from Wales. And actually, I can see it in that kind of West countryside as well, those small communities. And actually, I think you do see it more in Wales than you do in England. That's very stereotypical.
Yes, I mean it's about. I think I remember I saw a sign on a wall, and I think for me this is something that, again, it probably to a lot of people would make no sense at all. But this for me is the inspiration, as it were, behind the background of the gnome people, and that is anybody can hug, but only a Welsh person can cwtch.
Can what?
Cwtch.
What does that mean?
Exactly, that's my point. A cwtch is it's like a hug, but it's not. It's impossible to describe. But it's basically it's a sense of enveloping warmth, and that right there is the inspiration, as it were, behind the gnome culture. To be hugged by a gnome is to be cwtched.
Brilliant. So. This just made something pop into my head, and I know the answer to a couple of these, but anyway, but I want to ask the question, which is something I think interesting, because how many, I know a couple, but how many characters that were made were based on real people? Or do you not want to say?
I am personally aware of,
or based vaguely on real people.
From book 1, I'm aware of 3. There might be more from Tom's side, but if so, I'm not aware of them. Mainly because the initial creation of characters was done entirely by Tom.
Right.
And the background of them was then explored later on between the two of us. But the none of the background, well, the background of 1 was based on Tom.
Yeah.
Which is actually a joiner, but anyway. And the others are based on, what was it? The name of 1 is based on me, and then there's the look and personality of another that's based on another guy that Tom and I grew up with. I didn't really know him, but Tom did. But I did. I was in the same town, so I counted.
Right. Cool.
So we've got. I might as well mention this.
Yeah.
So we have the one that was based on like I said, a guy that Tom's very good friends with. I've met at a tournament. Lovely guy. Didn't realise that he was like in the same school and all that. And that's the character Fritz. And the guy Fritz looks like him, talks like him, has the personality. This guy is exactly like this guy. And absolutely legend of a guy. Then, of course, we've got Boom Boom McBoom, which is based loosely on myself.
Yep.
And it's because, I've got receding hairline and I'm grumpy and I have a shotgun and I want people to get off my land. Not really. But the reason, growing up, I had a nickname that was given to me by a friend, and that was Richie Boom.
Oh, right.
And as a result of that, a lot of my friends picked up on it, and I had a nickname, Boom Boom. And as a result of that, Boom Boom McBoom was a name Tom picked. There we go.
That's cool.
And then, of course, we have Young Jack. That's the fluff wise is heavily based on Tom.
Yeah.
There's one thing in particular.
Will Tom want you to share this?
I don't know. It's the story of the. Oh no, there's another one as well. Of course, I missed off. There's of course Joanna. I forgot about Joanna. Yes.
Yeah, although Joanna was book 2 character, isn't she?
Yes, she's book 2 character. But the final story in the deluxe rule book is a meeting between the gnome princess Joanna, who is based off Joanna, Tom's real girlfriend, and the character of Young Jack. And while I have no idea how those two actually originally met, in my head, it is entirely the headcanon of how that story goes out. Most importantly, with the fact of Tom getting really, really flustered at the fact that his hair is not sitting the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that just popped into my. That wasn't something we discussed before we started this, but that something just popped into my head. I thought I knew about Boom Boom Boom, and I knew about Young Jack because we talked about it before.
Yeah.
But I was interested to know if anyone else was. And obviously I knew about them.
Yes, I'm not sure. I don't think there is for anyone else. I mean, obviously, with some of the stuff we've got coming up with the Kickstarter, then there's at least one character who is, of course, based on somebody.
Oh yeah. I'm fairly familiar with that one. we'll get to that later. So I think that's kind of book 1 covered as much as I kind of wanted in terms of the background. I think that basically the lesson from this is that if anyone wants to know more about the narrative in book 1, you just go and buy book 1.
Absolutely.
Because and why wouldn't you? It's such a good book. I'm so glad that I added it to my Kickstarter, and if I hadn't, I would have bought it anyway, I think. But yeah, it's a great book, and not just the narrative, but the artwork in it.
Yeah.
And just the finish of it. I think actually that's one thing that I was really impressed by when I received the book, is that it was a product from a Kickstarter, and the finish was just perfect. And I know that Tom, I remember talking to him about it with the models as well as everything else. He's quite sort of, I wouldn't say OCD is not really, it's almost makes it sound like it's a bad thing, but he was a perfectionist.
Yes.
With the models and with the gameplay and with the book as well. And it really, And he almost, when I was talking about it, he almost was saying it like it was some kind of bad thing. I was like, no, mate, it means it's perfect. The book is absolutely brilliant. I don't know what else you could have done to make it any better. And same with like the models, like they are like the sculpts are exactly how they should look. And yeah, there was, I know that there was issues in the sculpting with bits breaking and things, but actually the design of them and the look of them is almost perfect. And I'm actually going to do a different podcast, either my next one or another one, where I talk about just the models themselves. So I won't talk about it too much now because that's going to come in another episode. But yeah, I think that's book one covered. So the next thing really is for you to say as much as you feel like about what's coming up in the future.
Well,
obviously we mentioned it in the last episode, and it's kind of everywhere at time of recording, is that there's a new Kickstarter coming soon.
There is.
Exciting, on the 27th of March 2019.
Good memory.
So shall we? I don't know. I should probably remember that. So shall we focus on that for now?
Yes.
And I think what we'll do is focus on that, because that's something that will be really useful for us to discuss. I'm also interested to know a bit more about it anyway, because actually it's not a narrative I know as much about.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll save the rest of book 2 narrative for another podcast.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Well, do you want to fill us in as much as you want in the lesser book?
Yes. So the Kickstarter is introducing the new faction to the world of Moonstone called the Lesher Vault, which of course is a name referring to the cultists of the god Leshevit. Now, Leshevit is
you might fill that in.
Pardon?
Yeah, you might want to fill that in.
Yes, Leshevit is the old god of Torba that was of entropy and nature. So, so we're talking about birth, life, death, and rebirth. And just like death and taxes, these things are all, it's going to happen. You can't change it. And that's what this god is of. Their symbol is of that of a deer skull, which I just think is a really impactful image by itself.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely.
And he is, and because he in himself is almost like an embodiment of the Commonwealth and Dominion combined. Because we talked earlier about how everything has a shade of grey. Well, he is grey. Because yes, there is entropy does involve death. There is decay, decomposition, all this horrible stuff going on, but from death and decay does spring new life. And so this is kind of their whole deal. They might be, to some people they'd be seen as death worshippers. To others they'd be seen as life worshippers. It all depends on your own personal view of things. And so it's a little bit of a offshoot for us, because it's allowed us to explore an awful lot of new concepts which we've wanted to explore for a while, and that is, from my point of view, largely down to Eastern European folklore, as opposed to the more Germanic and Western European that we've got at the moment. And there's and part of it is the fact that you do have that whole, we're all familiar with things like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, and how you've got the Disneyized version now, but what we all know about the original versions. My personal favourite that I didn't even know until actually quite recently is the story of Hansel and Gretel. Now, of course, we all know the story of Hansel. It's a pretty horrible story by itself.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know was what happens at the end. And that they didn't just kill the witch and take her house and go back home. They killed the witch, ate her, and then took her house and went back home.
Yeah, there's a reason why they're called the Brothers Grimm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was something that we've been able to touch to certain degrees on this sort of thing so far, but at the same time, we haven't focused so much on it, and this has been a great opportunity to really explore that side of things. But by doing so, still from the Shades of Grey view, so that we're still having fun in there, we're still having humor, but at the same time we've got this dark side to it. But likewise, we're able to really push that. So so therefore, whereas before we might have a character who's slightly amusing and a character who's slightly sinister, now we can have one of the things we're looking at is having a character who is pretty really horrible and another character who's absolutely hilarious, and in doing so, it's creating that counterbalance.
Yeah, and they can stand side by side in a Lesher Vault truth, can't they?
And of course,
I think it's okay to mention. I think it's okay to mention the characters, because by the time this is out, those have all been. So you got characters like Lou. How's it pronounced? Lubard or Lobard?
Yes, Lubard.
Lubard the giant, who's a blind giant. But he's not necessarily like, but he's quite sort of sinister in that he's sort of swinging this huge sensor bearer,
an aromatic sensor.
Yeah, and he's very religious, isn't he? So he's and then on the flip side of that, you've got Brother Daniel, who well, I might as well say now is loosely based on me. Which is great. I think I was so happy when you said you were going to do that. So I'm ecstatic, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys have let me contribute to his design and play style and everything, which has been fantastic. But he is hilarious. And the bit I love about him most, which when I get the model, I'm going to paint this on his sign, which was the thing that you said, which is the end is nice, so free ice cream to everyone, but not for you. You don't get free ice cream. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna write on inside, free ice cream to everyone except you. I just thought that just made me laugh a lot, and it still does when I think about it now. Like, he's a bit mad, but also quite funny, but also like it's like the end is 9. That's a good thing.
Exactly. So for those who are not familiar, who haven't seen it, Brother Daniel is literally a doomsayer, and I find the concept of doomsayers so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they are.
For those familiar with UK culture, especially London culture, you've got the sinner. Are you a sinner or a winner guy? I'm assuming. Are you familiar with this guy, Daniel?
No, I'm not familiar, but I'm familiar
There's
with
one guy, and he had this really strong. I think it was Scouse accent, and he used to hang out on Oxford Street in London. And so he would there with like this big boombox type thing and all these signs. And people would walk. He would with a microphone. Go, "Are you a sinner or a winner?" I'd be a sinner when you could be a winner.
Wow, brilliant! I didn't know people like that existed.
Yeah, this big massive bum bag. And so that's the reason why. I mean, I think you were part of the process for this as well. So we have to have a bum bag with this guy, because this real person had this big bum bag he carried around with him.
Yeah.
And so all these different factors are there. And the idea is that he's saying that, the end of the world is coming, because as far as he's concerned, I said he worships this god who's all about entropy, and he's saying the world is going to end, and it's going to be by my god's hand, and he's going to rebirth it all. But that's a good thing. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going off a tangent a bit there, but yeah, basically that's why is interesting about the Lesher Vault faction, I think. Actually, the video will probably go up before this podcast, as we did some playtesting of some of them yesterday, and they were very interesting to play with, because they're very different to the other factions to play with. On the tabletop, there's
we definitely tried to do quite a few different tactics with them.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly played them really badly because I just didn't. I made really textbook errors. Like, I activated my healer first, and then sent one of my healers out on the edge. It's like, oh, that was silly. I played them very well. And to be fair, I was playing against Jack, who was using gnomes, and he played the gnomes really well. So, but it was still really interesting to play them, because they're very different.
Yeah.
and I played essentially two of the box, obviously the boxes that are coming out in the Kickstarter. So I played the End is Nigh troop set, which is Brother Daniel, Kavanagh the Jungler, and the Leshbot Priestess, and then I played the Witches, which is called a Witch in Time, and so Zoya, Antonia, and Danica. The Witches I really liked. They were my favourites actually. That's why I was using my own character. He was funny. He did catapult one of them across the board, which was fun. But actually, the Witches I think I really like the mechanic in theirs, where they're better when they play with each other.
Yes.
And they get even better if one of them dies.
Yeah.
Which I thought that's even better, because usually things get worse. Actually, they get better when people die.
Yeah.
So I really like that as well.
The Witches was something I'm really happy with in terms of the idea of them, because I felt that there was one thing that Moonstone's fluff, lore, whatever, was missing. And it was interesting because if you look at the game itself and the product creation, all of this sort of stuff, everything there follows the rule of 3.
Yes.
So all our troop boxes have 3 characters, and you keep, and that's just the first thing I can off the top of my head. If there's constant, the number 3 keeps coming up. On the arcane cards, it goes to number 3, and there's only those 3 ones, and all these different things. You have 3
and in the melee cards, there's 3 of each.
Exactly. The rule of 3 is constantly present.
There's 3 attacking ones, there's 3 defending ones, and there's 3 of each of those.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you look at almost any culture in the world, they all seem to have the same thing, and that is the story of the 3 hags.
Yes. Yeah.
The Greeks had it with the Furies, Macbeth, all these different things, and they all are present. And I felt that was something that we were missing, and we needed to introduce our 3 hags. So that's who the Witches of the Day are.
But I really like the fact that the 3 witches all look very different.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to release this podcast after Tom has released the images of the witches.
They look good, don't they? They look really good.
They're great. And I'm going to make sure this comes out after that, because I do not want to spoil it, because they look brilliant. And I like the fact that there's a younger one, a middle one, and an old. Like there's like the stereotypical hag.
Yeah.
There's like a bumbling kind of witch-looking character.
Yeah.
And then that's the basically sexy character.
I like the word perky.
All right. But yeah, but I like the fact that you didn't go for just 3 looking witches. They all look very different.
Yeah.
They all play very different. But they have that really interesting connection, which I really liked. I think the Lesher Vault will bring something very interesting to the table for
I hope
player.
so.
They're not going to be an easy. I mean, this is going off the narrative side of things a little bit, but they're not going to be an easy faction to play.
Yeah. Well, virtually every single character was, can we create something that's almost. I mean, for those who are familiar with Magic the Gathering, one of the things that for me was involved, and in both the narrative and the game idea, was actually almost tying in with, for those who are familiar with it, with the unglued concept.
I don't know Magic the Gathering at all. So
that's fine. So Magic the Gathering, of course, they do different series, and one of their series was called the Unglued Range, and the Unglued Range was almost a comic range. So you would have things like, what was it? I think there was one. It was called the Undead Poultrygeist. So rather than poltergeist, it was a chicken ghost, and it was something like, if any time the opponent tries to damage this card, if you stand up and do a chicken impression, it takes no damage.
Right.
So it was this element of silliness, but at the same time, there was also quite a bit of darkness in there as well. And this was something that I looked at from my point of view, because the Lesher Vault are very much my baby. I've really, really strongly involved in them, and there's so an awful lot of it, especially to do with the Cursed in particular, who are an upcoming one to be in the Kickstarter. Every single part of them was like, right, I want something that is different, that is unique and unusual. And so, I mean, the most I would say is, I've got no problem saying this. I love is the character of the Revenant.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd say that because I really like that one as well. That's my
He
favorite.
is,
Out of the Cursed, that's my favorite one.
yeah. I had no idea how the rules were going to end. I basically just went to Tom and I said, look, this is the idea. This is what he's going to be. I'm happy to say this. He's an undead character. He's a revenant. For those who are familiar
Yeah.
with the idea from fantasy, he's a revenant. He's a human or a mortal who has been killed and brought back in his corpse. And just like the classic stories of revenants, he has unfinished business to deal with. And so because of this, every time you kill him, he keeps coming back.
Yeah. And the only way he can die is if he finishes his business.
Exactly. And
Which
so
sounds dirty.
exactly. And that's a great thing as well, because he's got a really powerful ability, but if you use it, you kill him and you take him out of the game.
Yes, yeah. He's got
Yes. So I mean, that was all Tom. But I went to him and said, "Look, this is the idea. This is what he is. His concept is all around that he dies and comes back again."
Yeah. Well,
you go nuts.
I've play tested him once so far. I think I was the first person to play test him, which was quite fun. And he was very interesting to play with. And talking to Jack about it as well, because he was my opponent, but he doesn't play against. Because with most characters, when you get into combat with them, you're trying to kill them.
Yeah.
Whereas with him, you're trying to not kill him.
Exactly.
What you're trying to do is reduce him to about 3 or 4 wounds and then leave him there.
Yeah, because there's nothing you can do then.
Because then there's nothing you can do. You're trying not to kill him.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. I know that Tom's still banding the rules around about how to make him, because at the moment he looks like he could be a bit too good.
Yeah.
So probably needs a little bit of a nerf.
Yeah.
But I think he's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
And then the great thing is you got, and we mentioned this earlier, you got the Revenant, who's quite he's a serious character. There's no comedy in him particularly. Yes. And then you've got Boris the Bunny Summoner. Which you can mention now definitely, because the artwork has already come out as well.
Yeah.
He's a slightly mad wizard who summons murder bunnies.
Exactly. Because who doesn't like murder bunnies?
Who doesn't like murder bunnies? I mean, that is just perfect. It's literally perfect. I can't wait to play a game where I've got Brother Daniel, like Priestess, the Revenant, then maybe the Witches, and if I've got a space left, I'll have Boris as well, just so I can have the Revenant in combat alongside a murder bunny. That will make my day, with the Revenant trying to do his unfinished business, and there's a murder bunny next to him.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I think it's not going to come out. It's not going to come across until the art is complete and this, that, and the other. But one thing that I'm also really looking forward to showing off more of is the character of the Beast.
Yeah. So, do you want to explain a little? Because you go ahead and explain a little bit about the Beast.
So, the Beast is heavily inspired by the original story tale of Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
And the idea is that, just like in the original story, he is a monstrous-looking character, but he is still a human noble at heart. And so his concept is this duality, that he looks monstrous, but he doesn't actually play monstrous. Right. So he's more about board control and fear-inducing and all this sort of stuff, despite looking like he should be something that's going to rip your face off.
Yeah. That's interesting. I would like that. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then obviously the other one in the Curse box set is Anya.
Yes, Anya.
And that's like, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my impression of it. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. Is it a little bit like that, or am I wrong?
It is. She's based off a character from, and this is the thing. This character started the whole thing. From this character started the entire faction, and that is she's based off a character who was featured in the very first Witcher novel.
Okay.
So the book is called The Last Wish, and in it featured a princess who was cursed to at night transform into a ravenous monster. And that is as simple as that. And because the thing is, the witch novels are brilliant Eastern European stories, again, all based on Eastern European folklore. And so again, I was listening to them on audiobooks, and then as a result, going, this is brilliant. I happened to work with a Polish woman at the time, and I was saying, look, this is really interesting. Can you, as the person who knows about this, give me some more information on it? So she did. She loved her fairy tales from where she grew up as a kid. So she would tell me about them and all this sort of stuff, and it was a brilliant inspiration for the whole thing. Cool. And in the case of Anya, she is a young Disney princess who transforms into a flesh-eating, horrifying monster.
Yeah, because I played tested her as well, and her combat heavy profile.
Yes,
she has 2 cards, doesn't she?
Yes.
Her combat heavy one is horrible. She's very good. And I can't remember who she was against, but she's completely murdered someone. And it was really fun because on the last attack action, I just turned back into a nice sweet little girl again.
Yeah.
And started healing people again. This is very nice.
Yeah.
I do like it. There's not a single at all. I don't think there's a single character in the whole game I dislike, but there's not a single character in the Lester Revolt faction that I've seen so far that I haven't thought that's awesome. I really like all the characters. I think they're very interesting, and I think that and this actually goes for the whole range actually. One of the things I really like about Moonstone as well is that you can it's very easy to just build your own narrative when you're playing.
Yes.
And that part of that is to do, I think, with the mechanics of the game. It's very easy to build a narrative in the melee.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you literally can almost see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the arcane as well. That bluff mechanic. Well, first of all, it's obviously really original, which is really nice in a game. Yeah. But again, you can build a narrative about it because it means that you create a relationship with your opponent more, because you're trying to learn to read their face and there's another guy. So Jack, some people will be familiar with, is my fellow Ye Olde Battle Reps player, and we've been playing games together for 12 years. But I also regularly play Moonstone with a guy called Ryan, and actually he only plays Moonstone because he used to play Warhammer as a kid, and then I actually work with his mum. She was my TA at the school I work at, and then he was talking about wanting to play games again. I said, well, he can come over to my house and play a game. And this was about the time where I think it was just before the Games Expo actually, but it was really heavily into Moonstone. I said, well, we should play Moonstone because it's brilliant. And he loved it, but his favourite part of the game is the bluff mechanic, not the melee, which is interesting because most people when you say it's the melee mechanic, but his favourite is the bluff mechanic because and you can see it because he loves bluffing. And he often bluffs when he probably shouldn't. And I've got to know that. And he always thinks I'll tell the truth. So I often get a few sneaky bluffs in because he thinks I never lie.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And again, gone off topic again there, but that doesn't really matter. We're talking about. So
you're right. Every single game has a storyline. And I know a couple of times in the past, I was trying to write up some battle reps of myself, my own, and I found it so easy to create a story behind it because it wasn't just player 1 versus player 2. It was a themed, because of how the synergies of the characters work, you always end up with a theme in one way or another with your troops, and and the events of how it was going, where things, because of course either something might miss, but in doing so it's explained. It's a successful calling or failure of a cast of an arcane ability. It's not just it doesn't work. It's because the ability has been missed, or there's been blocked, or this, that, and the other. And then of course you've got the catastrophes, which something is happening. It's actually happening.
Yeah, like his gun's blown up in his hand, or the spell has backfired. Exactly. And I think that's also coming back to the Lesser Volts again, is really interesting in the Lesser Volts, which is not the case, I don't think, in well, apart from possibly the fire spitter, where you might want to blow him up,
Yes.
the kamikaze fire spitter. In the Lesser Vault, there's quite a few catastrophes that are quite useful.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of characters that can make a friendly person have a catastrophe, which is really interesting. I won't go into details about the cards. I don't need to do that, but that's something that's very different as well.
Yeah.
Is that you know, for most people, you don't want a catastrophe, like I say, with the exception of the fire spitter, where you might want to do that, charge them into good people and blow them up.
Yeah.
But there's quite a few Lesser Vault characters where you'd want to get them around a group of other people and then get off that catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can actually see people, playing catastrophe as a card.
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm gonna go and what kind of picking? I'm picking catastrophe, and you can see the opponent looking at you going, "What?" Because that's not what you play in it with anyone else.
I mean, in itself, that is a bit of a risk we are running, because of course, whenever a game does something that does involve new thinking and new concept ideas, and I said even though we're doing everything we can to make the Lesser Vaults Moonstone-y, they are still different. And the moment you introduce difference and change, obviously you run the risk of putting certain people off. And I need to point out that, following the Kickstarter, we are going to go on to do a book 2. And book 2 does not involve Lesser Vault in terms of characters. It's expanding on the Commonwealth and Dominion. So, we are not forgetting about this. We're not saying that it's, this is the direction we're moving. We are saying Moonstone.
Yeah, definitely.
And it is a gamble we are taking, but one that we think actually makes everything better. It doesn't.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and I mean, we've had discussions before, and I had a few misconceptions about what the Lesser Vault was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I actually think, we'll mention it quickly. Like in book 2, there's a good 15 new characters coming. I think
something like that. I think there's more than that. But yeah,
possibly more. That's the top of my head. I know there's at least 15. And that's both that's humans, gnomes, fairies, goblins. Have all got those new characters in. So there's plenty of the good old-fashioned Moonstone stuff coming in.
Exactly.
And actually, what I think the Lesser Vault bring in is something different. And it should be. I mean, there will be people who will whinge, because people love to fucking whinge. All the other kind of games I play, like when I play 40k, and people who whinge about 8th edition not being as good as 7th. People who whinge about Age of Sigmar not being the same as Fantasy. Well, just play Fantasy then. people who whinge about when Guild Ball changed. People whinge about that. People love to bloody whinge. But actually, if you don't like Lesser Vault, don't play them. Because actually, in the end, yes, Moonstone, I hope, will become a competitive tournament game, because it works very well as a tournament. I've run 2 tournaments.
Yeah.
I think it does work well as a tournament game, but it's also just a really fun game to play with your friends.
Exactly.
And that's got to be the core of it as well. It's got to, and what I think actually, and again, this is off topic really, but from the purpose of this podcast, but one thing that again is brilliant about Moonstone, and I could talk about it for days, but it is good for tournament play. I've run 2 tournaments and it worked really well. Yeah. Everyone enjoyed those tournaments. They ran like clockwork. The timings worked perfectly. The games worked fine. But it's also really good fun to play just a friendly game. I mean, I play mainly friendly games, but for a game like Guild Ball, for me, that game's been focused far too much down to just tournament, to the extent where I no longer want to play it, because it's taken the fun out of just playing a fun game.
Yeah,
because it's become too competitive. People measuring in millimeters with their inch measures to get the or you've nodded it doesn't bloody matter, surely. I just want to sit down and have fun, kind of thing, and that is for that, which is a shame because the game is brilliant. Yeah. But Guild Ball got spoiled for me by basically people cheating in tournaments. Whereas I don't think that'll happen in Moonstone, because it's still got a big focus down there, having a fun time with your friends.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever I get the opportunity, I always say, one of the core factors, the core values of Moonstone was focused on what I personally refer to as the social contract between players.
That's great. Yeah.
I don't play games to play the game. I play a game to have an excuse to spend time with my friends.
Yeah, definitely, and it's the same. Like me and Jack play a game just about every week, but it's not really about playing the game.
Exactly.
the game is an excuse for Jack to come over and have a chat for 3 hours.
Exactly. You have a couple of beers, have something to eat, you play your game, and
Yeah.
hopefully it's fun, and you talk about it afterwards. You talk about it during. I mean, the amount of times I'll play a game with Tom, and we'll be playing it, and halfway through it, I'll actually be talking to him about potential strategies that he could do himself that would beat me. Purely because I'm suddenly like, ooh, actually, this is a really idea. What do you? And I'm thinking to myself, why am I telling you how to beat me?
Yeah.
But it's because I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's exactly the same when me and Jack play, and actually when me and Ryan play as well. We'll be discussing what to do, and I'll say, well, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
This is why, and he'll say, okay, and he'll say, it doesn't necessarily follow my advice, and my advice isn't necessarily the best advice.
Yeah.
And it's not me trying to make him lose either. It's just this is what I would do.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I think that's something that's really good about Moonstone. I think it will keep that because I think that the mechanics of the game mean you have to build up a relationship with your opponent because of the way the game is played. Even when we were playing it, even when I was demoing it to people in Games Expo, and you only saw them for 30 minutes, I felt like I got to know those people quite well.
Yeah.
There's some people. I mean, some people came back again and again to play more games.
Yeah.
And the people that came back were people that bought it as well.
Yes.
It's great. But even the people who just came once, played for a bit, I felt like I got to know a bit about them.
Yeah.
Because of the way they played, and that was a really interesting experience. And it's been the same when I've demoed it to people. I've run, I think, 3 demo days in Norfolk in my local game store. It's been exactly the same. You've got to know a bit about people with the way they played their game.
Yeah.
And they got to know a bit about you, and that's really what it should be about.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a really nice place to round this off.
I agree. That's a lovely way to end it.
Yeah. And we've covered the narrative really well with a few tangents, which is absolutely fine. That's great. It's been really interesting talking to you. And I've learned some really new things about the narrative, which has been really good. And it's been really interesting having a chat about the background of Moonstone.
Yes.
And I really hope that people listening have enjoyed it for a start. I can't see why you wouldn't. I guess I'll just mention again, Kickstarter coming out 27th of March. I personally have no idea what the cost of that is to people, but trust me, it's worth every penny. I've seen all the characters that are going to be in it, and they are absolutely worth every penny. They look brilliant. And it's quite a short Kickstarter. I think 3 weeks. I think.
Yes, possibly 2. I think it's 3.
I can't. It's 27th of March to, I think, something like the 16th of April. I think sounds like 3 weeks. But
either way, it's not your standard. It's not your standard month or whatever.
No.
Yeah.
But again, I haven't got a calendar in front of me, so it's hard for me to say. Yeah, definitely worth. And again, if you haven't got it already, definitely worth getting the book.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that. That's for sure.
Yes, and you can tell because it's very well finished. It's a really lovely book to own, and I often take it on like journeys and things just to flick through. I still do, even though I know it like the back of my hand. I flip through it and just look at the pictures sometimes and things like that. And it's a lovely thing to own. So yeah, thanks a lot for chatting with me on this.
It's been a pleasure.
I think it's been great. I will try at some point to get these up on iTunes and in various places. At the moment, it's only on Podbean, but I will try and expand that if I can. Cool. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed that.